Alright, so for today, we are going to be going over one-step equations. So at the top of your notebook page, on page 51, you're going to put, I can solve one-step equations. And then you're going to put the date, which should be the 24th. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about our goal when we are solving one-step equations. Our goal is to isolate the variable. And isolate means to get by itself. So we want to get that variable by itself. That's our whole goal with solving these one-step equations. Okay, so when we're solving through these one-step equations, there's a set of steps that we also follow. So we'll say step 1. Our first step is to use the opposite operation. You can also think of this as undoing the observation. So you can think of it as the opposite operation or undoing the opposite operation. After that, step 2 is to bring down the variable and equal sign. Then finally, our third and final step is step 3, and we're going to solve for the variable. Alright, so let's look at a few examples here. There's a couple of different example types that we're going to look at. So for example 1, let's say we have x minus 5 equals a negative 1. Okay, so our first step told us that we need to use the opposite operation. So step 1 is the opposite operation. When we're talking about the opposite operation or undoing the opposite operation, we're talking about with that number that's on the same side as our variable. We're not talking about the number that's by itself already. We're talking about the number that is with the variable. So in this case, negative 5 is with the variable. The opposite of negative is positive. So we can add 5 to both sides. Once we add 5 to both sides, negative and a positive cancel out here. I'm going to bring down my variable, bring down the variable, and my equal sign. And then my third step tells me to solve for the variable. So to solve for the variable, we're going to do negative 1 plus 5 gives us 4. And that completes it. We have isolated the variable. We got x by itself. We got the variable by itself. We used the opposite operation. The opposite of subtraction is addition. Brought down the variable and the equal sign, and then solved for our variable. Alright, as a second example, this was example 1. For a second example, example 2. What if we had p plus 3 equals a negative 2? Alright, so remember, we are starting with the variable that is on the same side, or the number that is on the same side as our variable. We're going to undo this operation, so the opposite of addition is subtraction. Whatever we do to one side, we also have to do to the other side. That goes for all types of these equations. Because if we had like a balance scale here, if you add to the left side, you also have to add to the right side so that those scales stay balanced. If you subtract, so say you have 3 blocks that you're subtracting from the left side, we also have to subtract 3 blocks from the right side so that things stay equal and fair. Okay, so we're subtracting 3 from both sides. That makes our 3's cancel out on the right side, or the left side here. We're going to bring down our variable for step 2 and our equal sign. And then our third and final step tells us that we're going to solve for the variable. So we have -2 plus a -3 or -2 minus 3. Either of those works, which will give us a -5. So we have our final answer now, p equals -5. We've isolated our variable, p is by itself, and everything else is on the other side. All right, another type of one-step equation we might have. Example 3. If we had -4y equals 12. All right, so this one, we don't see a symbol at all. So because we don't see a symbol in between these two, when they're right next to each other, we don't have a plus, a minus, or a division. That means that we're multiplying here. So when you don't see a symbol, that means we're multiplying. So in this case, if we have multiplication, the opposite of multiplication is division. So that means I'm going to divide both of my sides by -4. Both sides are being divided by -4. That makes both of these -4's cancel out. We bring down our variable and our equal sign, and then we solve for our variable. 12 divided by -4 gives us -3. Okay, so now we've isolated our variable, we got the variable by itself, and we solved for it. We had multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we divided by -4 on both sides. Then we brought down our variable, our equal sign, and solved. All right, this brings us to our last example, example 4. For example 4, we might have something like x over 3 equals -6. So when we have x over 3, this fraction bar, as we've talked about, can also mean division. So right now with this fraction bar, we have division. The opposite of division is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3. So now what we have is these 3's canceling out. We bring down our variable x and our equal sign, and then we solve for the variable. -6 times a +3 will give us a -18. So we had the original problem where we had division. The opposite is multiplying to both sides. Bring down our variable and our equal sign, solve for our variable, -18. X is isolated, it is by itself, so we know we have completely solved it.